back, everyone, to our story. So last time we reread, it was a really exciting chapter. We're following Taylor now. So we've stopped following Michael's storyline, and now we're following Taylor. And we find out she's been abducted in a van with other people that seem to have similar powers to hers. We meet a character named Michelle that seems to be Taylor's age, who is able to suppress Taylor's powers and prevent Taylor from using her powers. And Taylor is taken to some sort of facility. I'm guessing like a lab of some sort because they take her into a doctor's office and do a few tests on her and then take her to her room. So we're about to see like what this facility is all about and why they abducted her. At least I hope we find out. We're in chapter 20 and it's called A Surprise Visit. I wonder who's going to visit. Maybe Michael will show up? I don't know. We'll see. And I think I remember in the last chapter them saying something about Taylor having a sister. So maybe that's what the surprise visit is. I don't know. I was released from the hospital around 6 o'clock. A social worker from the state had come to my room to talk with me, and it was agreed that for the time being I would stay with the Lisses. We stopped at McDonald's for dinner, then drove to Austin's house. Okay, I'm going to pause already because I'm already noticing that we're not following Taylor anymore. Now we're back with Michael, and he's staying at Austin's house. All right. Mrs. Liss had always been nice, but tonight she was especially kind. As we walked into the apartment, Mrs. Liss said, Michael, honey, can you get your things and bring them over? You and Austin can share a room for the time being. I'd like to stay in my own room for now, if that's okay. She thought about it. It is just down the hall. I guess that'll be all right. Take this with you. She took a bag of red licorice from her pantry and handed it to me. It will help. Thanks. Want me to come over with you? Austin asked. Thanks, but not now. He patted me on the back. I understand. He's probably the only 15-year-old in the world who would. I walked down the hall. I unlocked the door, walked into the dark apartment, and flipped on the lights. Since we moved to Idaho, I had spent a lot of time alone, but the apartment had never seemed so quiet and empty. I looked down at my birthday watch, then I twisted it around my wrist. I'm going to pause again just to remind everyone that Michael's mother has been abducted as well. So he's coming back. No one knows where his mother went. No one saw what happened. And Austin came out and just saw Michael laying in the middle of the street. So Austin didn't see what happened either. My eyes teared up. Where was she? I went into my mother's bedroom. There was a picture of her nightstand of the two of us at Zion National Park in South Utah. It had been a beautiful day, and Kalab Arc could be seen in the distance behind us. As I picked up the photograph, I wondered if I would ever see her again. My heart ached, and I lay on her bed and cried. Oh, I feel sad for Michael. Sometime in the next hour, there was a knock on the door. I wiped my eyes and walked out. I had assumed it was Austin, but to my surprise, Taylor's dad and a woman I guessed was her mother stood in the hallway. They looked very upset. Officer Ridley spoke first. Hi, Michael. We're Taylor's parents. Could we speak with you? I looked at them nervously, reacting with my usual tics. I assumed they were here to talk to me about my mother. Sure, I said, stepping back from the door. Come in. Mrs. Ridley's eyes were puffy. Taylor's father put his arm around her, and they walked inside, shutting the door behind them. Is Taylor okay? I asked. Mrs. Ridley began to cry. Mr. Ridley said, When was the last time you heard from Taylor? Yesterday afternoon. She was going to go with us to the aquarium, but when we got to the school, she was gone. Mrs. Ridley began to cry harder. What happened? I asked. You haven't heard from her? Mr. Ridley asked. No, sir. He looked at me suspiciously. Then you didn't know that Taylor ran away? My heart froze. No, why would she do that? He shook his head. You know, I'm tough on her sometimes. He paused, overcome by emotion. I told her that if she didn't start spending more time at home, she would have to give up cheerleading. He rubbed his palm over his eyes. She texted her goodbye. We just didn't see it coming, Mrs. Ridley sobbed. She won't return our texts, Mr. Ridley said. He took his wife's hand. We wanted to ask you a favor. We just want her home and safe. Will you please tell her that we love her and we would really like to talk to her? If I hear from her, I said. I felt sick, but I knew I couldn't show it. But I'm sure she has a lot of other friends she'd contact first. Then you have no plans to see her? Mr. Ridley asked. There was a strong inflection in his voice. No, I haven't heard from her since yesterday. They were both looking at me with a peculiar gaze. Finally, Mrs. Ridley said, an hour ago she sent another text that said, tell Michael I'll see him soon. Chills went up my spine. When I could speak, I said, I don't know what she meant by that, but if I hear from her, I'll call you, I promise. They both sat looking at me, and I guessed they were trying to decide whether I was telling the truth or not. Finally, Mr. Ridley said, thank you, Michael. They stood and walked to the door. Mrs. Ridley stopped in front of my door, blotting her eyes with the Kleenex. I don't know if you know this, but Taylor was adopted. She told me. The counselors told us that sometimes adopted children can carry a sense of abandonment. We tried to fill that, but I guess we failed. I don't think you failed, I said. There must be some kind of misunderstanding. That's kind of you to say, Michael. Taylor thinks a lot of you. I think if you told her that we love her, she'll believe you. I think she might come back. I don't know what's going on, but I do know that Taylor loves you both. I'll let you know if I hear from her. Thank you, Mrs. Ridley said. Mr. Ridley put his arm around her and led her out of the apartment. As soon as they were gone, I ran down the hall and knocked on Austin's door. Austin answered, the door holding a half-eaten toaster strudel. He read the panic on my face. What's wrong? They've got Taylor. Chapter 21, Dr. Hatch and the Twin. Okay, now we're going to start hearing about Taylor's supposed twin and Dr. Hatch. That's an evil-sounding name. The cell Taylor was placed in was windowless and rectangular, with the walls, ceiling, and floor lined in a soft pinkish rubber coating that resembled the material that pencil erasers are made of. Mounted to each wall were surveillance cameras, speaker boxes, and other sensors designed to monitor the cell's occupants' activities. On one wall were two chrome bars that stuck out about 6 inches from the wall, similar to the testing apparatus in the exam room. In one corner of the room, there was a porcelain toilet and sink. The only thing that looked normal was the bed, which was on a wood frame. Taylor walked over to the bed. There was no metal of any kind used in its construction. The mattress was filled with down feathers. The bed had one other difference she didn't fail to notice: leather restraining straps. The room was lit by fluorescent lighting concealed behind thick plastic plates. There was neither a thermostat nor switches in the room of any kind, and she had no control over light, heat, or air. The people watching her from the cameras would decide when she would have lights and how hot or cold she would be. She had no control over anything. Taylor turned on the sink and was grateful that water came out. She still felt nauseous from the car ride, and she washed her face in the cold water. Then she went and lay on her bed, looking up at the ceiling. She wasn't sure what time it was. She wasn't even sure what day it was. Mrs. Shaw would be furious with her for missing cheer. Taylor shook her head. Had she not been so afraid, she would have laughed at the thought. If only Mrs. Shaw was the worst of her worries. Besides, everyone would know by now that she had been abducted. They had to, didn't they? Her friends would be calling one another. They'd organize search parties, wouldn't they? She thought of how worried her parents must be. Just a few days earlier, they had scolded her for being gone from home too much. The argument had ended with her slamming her bedroom door. She regretted how she had acted. She'd give up everything she had, to be home right now, even cheerleading. As Taylor lay on the top of the bed thinking, she heard a quick burst of air followed by a sharp metallic click. Her door opened. Nichelle stepped inside, followed by a tall man in a suit and tie. He wore oversized, black-rimmed glasses with dark lenses that concealed his eyes, similar to the glasses the doctor had put on her during the tests. All right, so it seems like Nichelle and this guy walking into her room are the same two people who abducted Michael's mom. Sit up, Nichelle barked. Taylor sat up on the bed. The man walked to the center of the room. Hello, Taylor, he said. You're a sight for sore eyes. Taylor stared at him, her heart pounding fiercely. He said, hello, Nichelle said. A sharp, piercing scream entered Taylor's head. Taylor grabbed her ears and let out a small scream. Stop. Stop it, the man said sharply to Nichelle. Go. Nichelle frowned. Yes, sir. She walked out of the room without looking at Taylor. I'm sorry about that, the man said. Nichelle gets a bit draconian. I hate her, Taylor said. She immediately regretted this, wondering if she'd be punished. To her surprise, the man just nodded. Be assured that you're not alone in that, he said. Most of the students here do. He smiled warmly. Let's start over. I'm Dr. Hatch. You are the Elgin Academy. You are at the Elgin Academy. I hope your trip here wasn't too unpleasant. Taylor looked at him incredulously. Why have you kidnapped me? You can't hold me here. My father will find you and... He raised his hand. Your adopted father, Dean Charles Ridley of the Boise Police Department, thinks his little girl has run away. In fact, you've already texted him twice today, telling him how much you dislike him. Now you never intend to go home as long as he's there. Hearing this made her heart ache. Taylor began to cry. Why are you doing this to me? Taylor, I'm sorry it had to begin this way. I really am. But once you see things for what they really are, I promise you won't be upset anymore. He stepped toward her and crouched down to look into her face. Do you know how long I've been looking for you? You're a very special girl, not just because you're a glow, but because you have something that we can't learn from other glows. What's a glow? That's our term for the electric children. You all give off that faint glow. Surely you've noticed it. She didn't answer. I'm going to pause for a minute and make a prediction. I wonder if Dr. Hatch is Taylor's real father, because he says he's been looking for her for a long time, that she's a sight for sore eyes. So we'll see. Of course you have. Anyway, that's why I wear these glasses. He took them off and held them up so Taylor could see. We invented them right here. They are designed to magnify that glow. I can spot one of you a mile away. Actually, 1.7 miles to be exact. He rubbed his eyes, then he looked into her eyes and smiled. Taylor, you're a very special girl and part of something that's bigger and more exciting than you can imagine. We have a chance to change the world. I don't mean slap a band-aid on it. I mean throw the past out and start fresh. We could create a society where everyone has enough to eat, sufficient medical care, and housing. A world where life is about personal growth and expression and not survival. No more wars, no more hunger. A world where all your needs are met and you can be part of its creation. What are you talking about? We are creating a world of people just like you, a race of superior beings. He let the statement ring off in the silence. Taylor, do you know why you are electric? Because your machine didn't work right? He nodded. Very good, exactly. You see, some people, particularly some investors, saw that as a failure, but they missed the bigger vision. We discovered something much, much more valuable. You know, many of the great inventions of our day were accidents: microwave, ovens, penicillin. He smiled, even potato chips. Taylor said, You killed all those babies. Hatch stood. I didn't, he said sharply. The machine did. Accidentally. Accidents with machines happen every day, don't they? Let's keep things in perspective, Taylor. During that time frame, more babies died in car accidents on the California roads than were harmed by our machine. But you don't hear an outcry about that, do you? You don't accuse the car salesmen or automotive engineers of being mass murderers, do you? Of course not. Accidents are the price of civilization. Blood oils social progress. Sure, it was awful, but it was worth it. But was it worth it? Believe me, it was. He looked carefully into her eyes to see if she was buying his argument. He decided she wasn't. Still, it was unfortunate. And that's where you can help us and help save the lives of future babies. Would you like to help save babies' lives, Taylor? Taylor swallowed. Would you? Yes, she said softly. I thought so. You're a good girl. I like that about you. He leaned toward her. We want to study you to see why you lived, and they didn't. You can help us learn what the difference is between your body and theirs. If we can isolate that factor, we can create electric children without endangering their lives. And you, Taylor, hold a very special key to that discovery. Something that the other glows can't help us with. Do you want to know what that is? Taylor slowly nodded. You did well in science, Hatch said. I've seen your transcripts. You got an A- on Mr. Polson's last biology test. Not bad. So you know that one of the tools we scientists use to study genetics is identical twins, especially those who have been separated from each other at birth. It teaches us things about genetic influences versus environmental factors. What you're born with compared to what you pick up along the way. You, Taylor, are one of those identical twins. I bet you Nichelle is her twin because she hates her. I'm not a twin, Taylor said. Au contraire, Hatch said with an amused grin. I'd like you to meet someone. He turned back toward the door. Nichelle, please ask Tara to come in. At his command, a girl stepped into the room. Taylor froze. The girl looked exactly like her. Before she could say a word, Tara walked up to her and smiled. Hi, sis. Taylor's eyes darted back and forth between Hatch and Tara. I don't understand. Hatch smiled. Ah, the learning begins. There are a lot of things you don't understand yet, Hatch said, but you will. He smiled at Tara. Have a seat, Tara, just there on the bed. Thank you. Hatch's voice became softer, almost gentle. Taylor, you were born a twin. When your biological mother, a teenage girl named Gail Nash of Monrovia, California, gave you up for adoption, Tara was the first to be adopted. She went to home right here in Pasadena, just 3 miles from the academy. Right here in our own backyard. We found her almost 9 years ago. He looked at Tara and nodded enthusiastically. 9 years this coming June. Taylor just stared at the girl in astonishment. Could this be some kind of trick? You, Taylor, on the other hand, were adopted by a family in another state. And everyone knows how inefficient government bureaucrats can be. Your records were lost in the transfer between state agencies. You vanished like a grain of rice in a rice paddy. We might never have found you had you not come looking for your birth records. Taylor felt sick. Austin was right. She had exposed them. There were 17 electric children. We had located them all except for two, you and Michael Vey. Taylor jumped when he said Michael's name. Hatch smiled. Yes, you know Michael, don't you? She didn't answer. Don't worry. You did him a favor by leading us to him. We might never have found him without you. She felt even worse. He's here? Not yet, but he soon will be. In fact, he doesn't know it yet, but he's about to start planning his trip to see us. He turned to Tara. That's all for now. Why don't you come back a little later and show Taylor around? She stood. Okie dokie. She smiled at Taylor. It's so exciting to finally see you. You're going to love it here. We're contributing to the world in a way you never dreamed possible. And Dr. Hatch is the smartest man alive. Tara looked back at Hatch, and he nodded his approval. Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute. I feel like Tara is being too robotic, almost like she's being controlled in what to say. Maybe there's some sort of mind control going on with Tara, I'm guessing. I don't know. Let's keep reading. There's some really cool benefits to being here. Like we're not treated like children. Also, we have family vacations twice a year. I've been all around the world. And we get cool presents. She flashed her diamond watch. How many 15-year-olds have a $23,000 diamond Rolex watch? Thank you, Tara, Hatch said. You can tell her all about it later. I've got to go. I'm so glad you found us. I've waited years for us to be together. Ciao. She walked out of the room. Beautiful girl, Hatch said. Of course you know that, since you're an exact replica. He leaned forward, his face taking a gentle demeanor. So let me tell you what you can expect while you're here. Over the next few days, we'll be doing some general kinds of psychological testing. Basic stuff, blood work, an electrocardiogram, and a full body scan. We also have some special tests we've designed to help understand your special gifts. Nothing painful, we just want to make sure you're healthy. The doctors out there don't understand special individuals like you, and so they miss things. We've already saved the lives of some of your colleagues. I just want to go home. Hatch moved closer to her. Taylor, I know it's hard right now. You've been plucked from all you know like a rose from a weed patch. Change is always hard, but that doesn't mean it's not good. Usually the hard things in our life lead to good. Taylor wiped her eyes. You're not going to let me go home? Look, just 5 minutes ago you didn't even know that you had a sister, and now you do. And soon your friend Michael will be joining us. You need to stop thinking of this as an abduction and think of it as a long-awaited homecoming, a family reunion, if you will. This is your home. For how long? Taylor asked. Hatch looked at her with a perplexed gaze. For the rest of your life.